Welcome, everyone. So nice to have you join us for this last session of the third day of our Embodied Social Justice Summit. My name's Rae Johnson, and I'm going to be your host for this session. Today's class is on bodily authority as recovery and resistance with Dr. Christine Caldwell. All right, so I'd like to introduce you to, if you don't already know, Dr. Christine Caldwell. Christine is the founder of and professor emeritus in the somatic counseling program at Naropa University in Boulder, Colorado. She lectures and trains internationally and has authored 4 books: Getting Our Bodies Back, Getting in Touch, The Body and Oppression, and Bodyfulness. She offers trainings in somatic psychotherapy with specializations in addiction, play behavior, movement sequencing, therapist training, scientific inquiry, and bodily authority. I have had the pleasure of many deep conversations with Christine over the years, including some early conversations about the value and the need for researching the embodied experience of oppression. And Christine has just been a marvelous friend, colleague, co-conspirator over the many years that we've known one another, and I'm so delighted to have her share her work on bodily authority with you all today. So please join me in welcoming Christine Caldwell. Christine, it's all yours. Take it away.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Rae. I want to also really tell all of you how happy I am to be here, how thrilled I am to be here, and particularly it always is such an honor and a pleasure for me to be with my colleagues, and Rae is without a doubt my absolute #1 colleague and friend forever, and I've learned so much from you, Rae, and I am looking forward to learning so much more and just having such a good time at it. I also want to acknowledge Amber Gray, who I know is in there somewhere with us, and to acknowledge you, Amber, and your work and your friendship and your collegialship over the years. I'm sure there might be other people that I would love to call out, but I can't see anybody else. So, okay, well, I'll just plunge right in here and start with my share screen. And great, can everyone see that? Great, okay. So I wanted to begin by just saying a little bit about how by its very nature, this is edgy work, and it is work that is not by any means always comfortable to work with. I remember working with a friend at Naropa who was the diversity coordinator, and she said, "Oh yeah, I have to have my skin like my fingernails to do this work." You know, she was talking about the thick-skinned quality that she, as a Navajo Tewa woman, had to have to do this work. And so I just want to say that in the beginning and encourage you to take care of yourself as we go forward. Come in and out, both with your space, with your computer, and with your breath. Do what you feel right to do in your body. Particularly, that's kind of the topic of this evening anyway. So you know the self-care that works for you, whether it's conscious breathing or some kind of movement. Also grounding, visualization, self-touch, anything like that. So please feel free to really watch how we can oscillate, in a sense, into and out of our our real engagement with this work and our own self-care. And that's a principle that Rae and I think Amber as well, really talk about a lot, about how you really have to bring your attention in a sense into the work and really touch the work and hold it. And then you also have to oscillate back in and really take care of yourself, acknowledge what you're feeling, acknowledge how this is for you. So make sure that your oscillations are there and at your own authority. Okay, so let's see. I'm talking about bodily authority as recovery and resistance tonight, and I'm gonna talk about 3 different themes within that topic. So the first one is what I call a bodily free press. I think with this year in the States, but maybe all over the world, really, there's been so much attention to the political sphere that particularly here in the States, we are very interested in this idea of our constitutional right for free speech. And I'd like to really unpack that a little bit in terms of what a kind of bodily free speech would be. What is a bodily free press? So we'll go there. I also want to talk about what happens when there's not that free press, where we are at the receiving end of and really taught to be a docile or occupied body and what that does. And then talk about what I call the authoritative knowledge of the body, or actually Brigitte Jordan is the first person who coined that term, but the authoritative knowledge of the body, and we'll go into that. And then we'll talk about bodily authority. But first I would like to, from my location, say a little bit and acknowledge whose land I'm sitting on right now, whose land this is, where I am. Perhaps you know whose land it has been in where you are. But where I am, we are sitting on the land of the Utes, the Cheyenne, the Arapaho, the Shoshone, and the Arapaho. And those are just some of the tribes that have been in this land for about 13,000 years. So let's just take a moment and really feel the land that we're sitting on and the people in the land that we are standing and sitting on. Okay, and just to say a little bit about myself too, in terms of how we're going to look at issues of identity here. I just want to say that I'm white, I'm middle class, I'm a cisgender female, I'm older, I'm large-bodied, bisexual, and reasonably fit and able-bodied. I'm a long-time academic. That's one of the ways in which Rae and I love being together because we're both just unrepentant academics. It's very cool. So I'm a long-time academic and a clinician. So for all these years, I've been really doing both in the field of body psychotherapy and dance therapy. So I've actually always felt that my professional identity, I had one foot in body psychotherapy and one foot in dance therapy, and that was a very creative and productive place for me. And so Rae talked about my books, and I want to just now even begin with taking a moment and using particularly these 4 important resources, and just asking you to connect for a moment with your breathing. The idea here is that your breathing is yours, and that right now you can just notice your breathing as much as possible and just let it be. not making it right or wrong, not trying to change it or make it better according to some standard, but just take a few breaths, just consciously. Just being aware of the feeling of it. And now let's see movement as also a resource. And so one of the things we'll be talking about is how oppression really works with moving and the capacity to move and where you can and can't move, both in terms of the tiny little motions that are always happening as you sit and breathe and wiggle around in your chair, but also as you stretch or walk around in the room. Movement occurs along a continuum from very, very tiny and interior to very large and social. And so we are hopefully going to talk a little bit about that tonight as well. So make sure to play with your moving any way you want to, again, under your own sense of what feels right to you. Then the third resource is sensing. And so that ability to actually track the body, track my body, really feel what's going on inside, but also our senses are attuned to the surface of our body and to the outside world as well. So any form of sensing is important in terms of using it as a resource consciously. So it might be that you gaze around the room a little bit just to give your eyes something different to look at, or you bring your attention inside and notice, like I just finished eating dinner, so I kind of notice the fullness of my belly. It's a pleasant feeling. And then the last resource is relating. And so it's really fine to reach out, to say something, to put something in the chat, or to turn to someone who might be in the house with you, and to really get how much relating to each other is an important resource for our bodily authority. So let's just take a minute and any way in those four things, just take a minute and breathe and move and sense and look at somebody else maybe and say hi. And okay, I'm going to move right along because I, of course, put in too much into my hour and a half. So let's go right into this idea of a bodily free press. In other words, freedom of speech. And the idea being here that the body has its own forms of speech. They don't use words, they use movement that is in a cyclic relationship to sensing. And so the idea here is that we want to really explore this sense of advocacy for the right to move freely. So, for instance, one of the definitions of a domesticated animal, like a dog or a cat, is that their freedom to move around is restricted and guarded and put in charge of by someone else, by a human, let's say. And so really realizing how a freedom of movement, whether it's to move to the front of the bus or it is to, sit up really straight and put your hands on your hips. A lot of people in oppression circumstances really can't exercise their right to move freely. And so we want to really get that sense of how movement is so powerfully in this equation. And that also goes to our right to speak our own body language freely. In other words, I can really speak my own body language from my body culture freely. Also the right to express emotions and reactions freely, that I am not suppressed or I don't suppress myself in order to feel safe. Of course, in many cases you have to do that, but the idea that a bodily free press really is about this ability to express ourselves, particularly our emotional lives, freely. And the next one is this right to one's body narratives. So one thing that I'll talk about through this time is how the body is in a constant storytelling mode, and we're in a sense always in the process of narrating our state, our feelings, our intentions, our fears, all of this, and our stories. A lot of our own storytelling can be done through the moving body. And this is something that is, I think, again, an important part of our sense, how we're going to build this idea of bodily authority. And so I've said the word freely in a lot of these bullet points. And I mean, by freely, I mean safely and without hurting oneself or others on purpose. In other words, in the States, we have this, thing that we sometimes revere called our Constitution that gets really, it's a political football right now, might be the way to put it. And one of the ways in which any constitution can be misunderstood is to think that a right is completely unencumbered. So there's a sense of shaping to our freedom. It's not, I'm free to yell at you and call you names and yell fire in a theater and all that. So we want to understand how that really actually works, how we can feel and promote a sense of freedom within a body that is caring about itself and other bodies. So let's keep going with that. So when we understand this, all this work, again, from the vantage point of the body, I'd like to bring in some of these categories that we sometimes leave off in the identity acronyms. And so a lot of what I want to talk about tonight has to do with the body itself, the body in question. And so a lot of ways in which we oppress ourselves and oppress each other on the level of body is whether or not the body is symmetrical and what the proportions are of different parts of the body, and how we create norms for the right looking body, the right behaving body, the right moving body, usually around things like symmetry and proportion. Also, of course, skin color, light skin, being young. I haven't looked it up in a few years, but the cosmetics industry, what's spent on cosmetics in this country on a yearly basis is staggering. And then I haven't even lumped in elective surgeries that try to help you not look old, because there's something wrong with wrinkles, being old, the body being old. Also fitness. Sexual attractiveness. And this is a real, again, another very complex topic because particularly, well, all genders have this issue of, on one hand, I am pushed by particularly something like media and social media and commercial media to be sexually attractive, but I'm also blamed for being sexually attractive. I'm blamed for what happens to me by being sexually attractive. So also thin is a norm that is very common. You still see it almost ubiquitously in fashion magazines, for instance. So also clothing is oftentimes it's a wonderful expression of culture and of taste and aesthetics, but it can also be a signal for class and wealth and privilege. And so we want to make sure to hold that in our thoughts. Being what we might call able-bodied. And in other words, how we are norming on people that don't use wheelchairs. We're norming on ourselves on people who don't use canes or walkers or any number of variations on that thin, white, young, fit, attractive body that stands up and walks across the room. And of course, the gendered body. And so again, that sense that we so quickly are uncomfortable when we can't gender someone, and how people who are not signaling with dress and hair and other means a real strong gender identity are oftentimes really in a lot of danger. Okay, so I want to just throw out a few terms that we might be able to play with, because what all of that norming does is it creates what I might call somatophobia and somaticism. And so somatophobia is a fear and a mistrust of the body in general, my own and others, and particularly around its appearance, how it functions, its drives and instincts, and its mortality. And so here's where we see some religious folks, particularly in former times, but still sometimes in modern times, talking about the body as the source of sin. This would be where somatophobia comes in. But it's also that just that sense of not privileging other things rather than my body the way it is, and marginalizing my body the way it is, or others' bodies. And then somaticism is really a lot about marginalizing a particular body or group of bodies as a function of their difference from the privileged norm. And so here's where you want to put somaticism up there with racism, sexism, misogyny, etc. Okay, so just something to be aware of. These are some of the things I'll talk about tonight, and I just wanted to, as a dyed-in-the-wool academic, you're always supposed to define your terms, and so I just wanted to do these definitions here. And again, so body narratives being our body stories. They're not in French or English or Swahili or Bantu. They are in their own language, a language that we oftentimes don't bother to track or value. And body identity is, again, our sense of self as it's really generated and maintained by these body narratives, by our ongoing sense of who I am as a breathing, moving, relating, sensing organism. And so for me, identity is actually very strongly a body phenomenon. And I actually see the mind as one thing that the body does. And so my sense of identity is ongoing, but it's also very adaptable. It can change, it alters at a moment's notice. Different aspects of identity, it's multiple, so I have a lot of different body identities. I really feel this, for instance, like every Tuesday I take care of my 4-year-old grandson, and I can just feel my body becoming a grandmother body, or my grandmotherness of my body kind of comes out. And as he snuggles into me when I read a book, I can just feel this kind of lineage, grandmother lineage that I love. Right now, I'm not feeling that. I'm feeling something really different. I'm feeling sort of my professorial body more. But this sense of body identity is something that I think is really cool for us to take a look at. And so the last idea is this idea of bodily authority, our sense of empowerment and agency. Agency being the sense of that when I do something, I can, by and large, get something done, that I'm basically in charge of the results that I get. And so this is a huge issue, right? This is an issue because a lot of times what happens is our bodily authority is taken from us. And we have to really, again, look at how to resist that and how to recover from that. Okay, so that's our sort of initial foray into the ideas. Before I go into the occupied and docile body, maybe Layla, could you open up the chat and let's just see if anyone has any comments or questions before I go forward into the occupied or docile body. And I'll say that while we're going for that, sorry, I'm trying to keep track of the time, but I can't see it if my phone, okay, good. All right. This next slide, I want to give a shout out to the philosopher named Elizabeth Benke. She's amazing in her work on the body, and some of the bullet points in here are going to come from her, particularly this idea of the ongoing bracing. So I'll talk more about that in a minute. But Layla or Rae, do we have any questions that you can see or comments?
We have one wonderful comment from Amy who says, "Bless all unrepentant academics."
Thank you. Yes.
We also have a question from Lorena who asks, how might we use this as educators, the information that you've provided so far?
Yeah, well, I always hate to say this, but wait for it. I'm gonna unpack it a little bit more, and then I'm gonna talk about how we can use this. I think, though, that one thing that, let's say, if you're a teacher in a classroom, is the real careful and empathetic attention to the bodily integrity of the people that you're around, the students that you're with, and really asking them, how does your body feel right now? Asking what if your body was free, what would it do? We might not be able to do that right now, but I really want to know. So the idea of creating a sense of inquiry is maybe a teaser that I will give about that. That we want to create an atmosphere of inquiry about the authoritative body. And more to come.
Great. There's also a comment here, this last comment from Walter, who says, as Professor Emeritus of Adapted Physical Education, I am loving this. The field is moving forward.
Oh, yay, that's great. Thank you. And I hope there's more that you might want to contribute there, Walter. Thanks. Okay, so I've been working with this word bodyfulness. That's my latest book, but in that work with that word, I also realized that I needed to understand what bodilessness rather than bodyfulness is. What is bodilessness? Because I think basically that the way that oppression and marginalization occur is by oppressing the body and by marginalizing the body. And so I wanted to dig into that for a few minutes here. And so I'm talking about what some have called, particularly Elizabeth Benke, but many people have called the occupied body. In other words, your body is occupied by colonial forces, by political forces, by social forces, by a kind of a normative pressure that forces you to really internalize messages that are antithetical to body authority and to your ability to really be in a body full state. So your body can be occupied by the past, for instance. In a sense, we could say that trauma, unresolved trauma, is a way in which your body is still occupied by the past. In fact, Benke calls it sedimentation. She said the past sediments into your body. And so that your body is occupied by any number of forces that are oppressive. And so that sense of how that occurs is what we want to keep unpacking here. And also the docile body. For instance, the other night, Rae was talking about how studies about how women have a tendency to cede space when the space gets crowded, and they tend to cede space to men. And this is a really good example of what we might call a docile body. In other words, a body that has just learned that the only option is to go along with the physical oppression that's occurring around them. So how does that manifest? It manifests in bracing in the body. And this comes somewhat from the research that Rae and I have been doing for, gosh, over about 10 years now, I think, with qualitative interviews. And so many of our co-researchers were really talking about in these interviews the idea of how they had to kind of brace themselves against very, in many cases, small but very effective assaults on their bodily authority. And so you're protecting yourself, you're resisting, or you're bracing to resist, and you're bracing for the idea that something might happen. I remember in one of my interviews, a trans man was talking about what it was like to just get on a public bus and to go down the aisle of the bus and to monitor how he was being looked at as he would walk down the bus, and who it felt safe to sit next to and who not. So that would be, and he talked about that as a kind of a stiffening of his spine. Also, just being very physically careful, kind of shrinking or minimizing in the body so that you're less visible, so that you're less threatening, etc. I'm sure a lot of the presenters have talked about this already. Inferiorization. This is something that Benki talked about also. In other words, this is the idea that other people's agendas, even just physical agendas, how are the bodies going to move in the space right now? Other people's agendas become more important. Their physical, what they do physically is more important than what you do physically, for instance, or you make someone else's physicality inferior to yours. The worker body, there's actually some really excellent work that has been done about the idea of the worker and being sort of schooled to become a cog in a wheel of wealth production and consumerism. And so the worker body, so that you are trained to be a physical worker. And that isn't necessarily just manual labor. It can be things like data entry or very anonymous cubicle-like office situations where you're sort of trapped in a room with a computer all day. So think about that in terms of how work impacts our bodies, how work impacts your body. And is your body free in your work environment, or is it constrained? And does it have to obey a sort of a look and a feel and a kind of movement that keeps you identified as a worker? And of course, the other way to look at that is from a consumer standpoint. So you are minimized or marginalized if you don't have the right clothing, the right jewelry, the right cosmetics, etc. And that you are wrong if you're not consuming those things. So there's something really wrong with you if you, for instance, let's say in certain circles that you don't wear makeup or that you don't dress a certain way. So that's a consumer body. And the idea there is that your body as it isn't right yet. And you have to spend a lot of money and buy a lot of things in order to signal that your body is okay. And then there's the body of violence. Of course, this could be domestic violence, it can be social violence, but the normalization of violence towards the body is something that's, again, part of that occupied and docile body. What can be called toxic intercorporeality, which is a mouthful, but it's basically the kind of social contagion of bracing, being careful, all these other issues. In other words, if everybody around me is doing that, I start to do it as well. And this we can see a lot in families and family systems. In fact, we can oftentimes, this is talked about in terms of what's called intergenerational trauma. That I remember once I worked with a woman who was the daughter of two concentration camp survivors, and her body looked occupied. Her body looked like it had been in a concentration camp with a lot of slumping and turning of the head and not looking up. And you could see how she really absorbed her parents' bodies, and that they actually wanted her to do that. They felt that it would keep her safe. And so that might be one particular example. And so also just a failure to really be with your body, to what Benki calls occupy your body from within, to support your own body narratives, your own sense of this is my body, the way it is, the shape it is, the age it is, the ableness that I have, and to the inability to really stand into that it's threatening in certain systems to support one's own body narratives, body identity, and body authority. Okay, so this is from a dance production that I was a small part of in Hamburg, Germany a few years ago, where the young dancers wanted to make some statements about the consumer body and the body being commodified. So let's just take another breath here, or another wiggle, or another check-in to see how you're doing, how the room is. You might want to look at a few people in the frames and see some faces there. So just take a moment and be with your body the way it is. Again, just saying hello to it the way it is, as much as possible, not trying to change it or make it better, but just to say hello, this is the way it is right now. Of course, if you're uncomfortable, you want to wiggle and make it more comfortable. But in general, the idea that I can really say, okay, this is the sensation I'm having right now. This is my moment-to-moment identity, is that particular sensation, this particular stretch, the moving that I'm doing. That's, in a sense, me right now. And if anybody has any questions or comments, Layla, feel free to forward them right now. Let's see if there's anything that anyone wants to say at this moment.
I have 2 questions left over from the last time. Would you like to hear those?
Sure.
All right. Let me just pull them up here. There's a question about ethically practicing movement that's been appropriated through the years. For example, traditional South Asian dances, if we're not South Asian, or part of members of a group that has oppressed particular cultural groups.
Yeah, cultural appropriation of movement, right?
In that idea of freedom of movement, well,
yes,
how free?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and this sort of goes back to this issue of where are the guardrails, right? Yeah. Where are the sort of sensible constraints that keep me safe and keep me from hurting other people? This is an area that I've made many mistakes in, particularly since I have a background in dance therapy, and a lot of my colleagues are, just ready to dance at a moment's notice. And I have appropriated the movement signatures of other people that I've been with in ways that I got called out on and had to really take a hard look at. And so, however, I would also say that this is a very, maybe the word is contentious, but maybe also creative topic. I've heard, for instance, different musicians saying, hell yes, appropriate my music, please buy it. I want your money, and that's fair. And that artists all over the world feel like they need to be free to play with the movements of others, for instance, dancers. So this is something that I don't think there's any kind of hard answer for or easy answer for. But I think there are guardrails, and I think that, gosh, when I was in school, I took all kinds of what was then called ethnic dance classes. In fact, I had a requirement in my program to do different ethnic dance forms. I remember doing Yemeni and Korean And I even dressed up in fancy Korean performance brocades and doing performances. And so, which was a part of what my Korean professor needed me to do to get a grade. So it's a very interesting question. I wish I had more of a answer for you, but to say that there are guardrails in any freedom might be the way to put it. And it also has a lot to do with impact. And I think this has been talked about quite a bit in the conference. So the contextualization of moving in another culture's dance form or art form or just their street style is highly contextual, and it is about the impact that you're having. So does it impact someone that you just imitated a fist bump that they did or some such, and or did you very respectfully play with something as you choreographed a dance piece? So it's about impact, and it's about really what could potentially create or pressure someone to have a more docile or occupied body because you're moving that way. So that was a long answer, and I think I should probably go forward before I get into another question. Maybe we can.
I'll keep collecting them.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so this I've talked about a little bit more, a little bit previously, but there's this idea that there's a social maintenance of body oppression, that in a sense, we all maintain a kind of a somatophobia in a lot of social situations, and potentially somaticism in social situations. And so there's a couple ways we can take a look at that. So we call it body as project and this is not my term. I'm not sure if I remember who first termed it. Rae, do you know?
Chris Schilling.
Schilling, thank you. So body as project, in very quick and sort of casual terms, it's a way of viewing your body as a project. In other words, my body isn't me. It's something I have to take to the gym 3 times a week. It's something that I have to maintain, and I eat so that I don't overeat, so that I stay a certain weight, and and the body is seen as something that I almost like an object that I relate to, and that I have to pacify, or that I have to tame, or I have to rein in, or that I have to fight against some kind of natural inclination for it to get away from me. And so we see that a lot, again, with things like, I had this once when I had a client who was an Olympic, well, she was trying out for the Olympics in diving. And I sort of had this funny idea when I first started seeing her, she probably knows her body very well, but she's in the business of her body, working with her body all day long. But I was really amazed at how little she actually did see her body as herself, but that her body was a project, a kind of a tool that she had to work with. And how that impacted her was a lot of our work. So the body as a commodity is something that can be bought and sold. You see this a lot in the worker body, the occupied body of the worker, that the person who picks my fruit or my vegetables in the fields is a commodity. You know, they are a certain number of avocados per hour, and their body and the labor of their body becomes a commodity. And that, so the body in that sense is for sale in one way or another. And of course, body shaming and othering. I am told that this is, in some cases, epidemic amongst what we now are calling digital natives, people who grew up with cell phones and grew up with social media and never knew a time where there wasn't social media, that there's a lot of very casual body shaming that goes on in these kinds of environments, and making someone wrong for the body that they are. And of course, that can also be towards ourselves. We can feel a lot of internalized, again, we have internalized that kind of consumer, worker, occupied, docile body. And the way that we maintain that is through body shaming. And through body shaming others, just to show that we know what the norms are, and body shaming ourselves so that we keep ourselves domesticated. Another term that was, I don't know if it was coined by, but it was certainly popularized by Thomas Hanna, which is called somatic amnesia. Oh, sorry, sensory motor amnesia, sorry. And this is the idea that we are trained to simply not pay attention to how our body's moving, sitting, gesturing, how it's feeling, what its state is, that we're trained to not go there. We're trained to pay attention to others, to the outside world. The body becomes irrelevant, and the body becomes a distraction. And so sensory motor amnesia is a lot of what those of us who are in the more therapeutic field of body-centered work will work a lot with what's called sensory motor amnesia. People literally not knowing where their body is in space, literally not knowing how to track sensation. And of course, then our next one is body colonization and domestication. Now, I've talked about that before, but if we take for an example, Native American populations, well, we see the colonial settler actions that came onto this continent. There was a colonization of the land, certainly, and of freedom of movement, etc. But the colonization of the native body, whether it's here in the States or in Africa or Asia or South America, the idea that a colonizing force will colonize the body of those that they want to really make use of or commodify. And so to realize that colonization, again, has almost global kinds of repercussions, as well as very small, right in your family repercussions. Okay, so let's start to turn towards what we're gonna do here. And I will, let's see, do I wanna, yeah. Let me just pause and see if there is one more question while we, all of us take a little bit of a break, breather and everything. Let's see if there's another question before we move on.
Can I give you one from the ongoing list?
Yeah, you bet. Please do, Rae.
You'll like this one, Christine. Question is, can you comment on body somatophobia and Christianity and Catholicism?
Oh my. Oh, well, that hits right solidly at home. I call myself, like many, a recovering Catholic. And I feel very strongly that in my case, not in everybody's case, but in my case, my body was heavily colonized by my religion and the religion of my ancestors, particularly since my ancestors are largely Irish, but also German. And the quality of how the Catholic Church, when I was growing up, particularly in the I was born in 1952. So I was, way back in old school where, the services were in Latin, etc. And I also went to Catholic school all the way through high school. So I was taught by nuns all the way up through to when I hit UCLA in 1970, if you can imagine that transition. It was impressive. So for me, I feel deeply colonized by the Catholic religion, and I feel that I still uncover sedimented oppressions from being raised Catholic, particularly Irish Catholic. And for me, that idea that the body is where sin resides, where it comes from, where it's enacted, and that the body is basically only going to get you in trouble. And that in several cases, it was also called the devil. And so I'm sure other religions have their own versions of this big time. And I'm sure there are religions who don't colonize the body. But I can say that the idea, particularly in Christianity, of original sin, where you start out as a sinner before you're even born, is a concept that I could almost argue is antithetical to body authority. So I'll just say that. Let's.
If there's time, just got a message from Walter Davis, who said he has a comment to make that bears on this briefly, if there's time for that.
Yeah, let's do it right now. Go ahead, Walter. Why don't, Layla, can you unmute Walter, please?
Just 1 second. Yes, I'm finding, and I will do so. Just give me 1 minute.
Thanks.
Not a problem. So, Walter. Walter Davis.
Yeah,
Yeah.
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christina. I was an adapted physical education teacher for 30 years. And, but as I grew up, I was in athletics. I loved it. I even had some collegiate, but not an elite athlete. I was saw myself as too short, too skinny, too slow. But I did play basketball. Pick up basketball full court till I was 71, and then I was challenged by 3 major medical conditions, including a heart attack and hepatitis and so forth. So I lost my ability to do exercises and so forth, muscular atrophy and loss of strength and so forth. But I was a meditator. I became very much a meditator and focused a lot on my body. And during one session, it came over me, such a love of my body, appreciation for it, like I had never had before. And and I just want to share that I think it's so important that we love and appreciate the body that we have.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
thank you for letting me share.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Walter. Particularly a body that has experienced and is experiencing a lot of challenges, and a lot of challenges to what we think of as, again, the normative body. And I would also say that there are a lot of times when I work with people, they report, and I really believe them, that they're just incapable of loving their body at this point. And so it's important to acknowledge that and to say, even if you can't love your body for not being lovable just yet, that you're not there yet, but you're on the way. And there's something in there to love, even if there's a lot of body hatred or body shame that's internalized, that can be worked with over time. And we're gonna go there very soon. So thanks again, Walter. So I just wanted to come again to an anthropologist named Brigitte Jordan, because I think this is a very important, and I'm going to whip through it, idea, which is she studied childbirth practices in a lot of different cultures around the globe, and including US medical hospital births. And so what she, and I'm gonna make this very quick, she noticed that in a lot of American hospital births, there was the woman goes into labor, she comes into the hospital, she immediately surrenders her body to the doctor and to the machines. And so the doctor knows what's happening to her body, the machine knows what's happening to her body, and the doctor knows what should happen to her body and her baby's body. And there's this kind of surrender of authority that she saw over and over and over again in American hospitalized births. And of course, some of this is a bit dated. So notice that she published that in 1997. So she was actually looking in the early 90s at this study. So I think there has been a lot of changes, but still there's this quality that she was talking about what are the situations in which you surrender the authority of your body, the ability to say, here's what my body is feeling, here's my experience, and here's what I want to do about that, okay? And so she noticed that in a lot of other cultures where they had midwife cultures, non-hospitalized and working with midwives, she saw a very interesting dynamic where there were these two sources of authoritative knowledge. So the midwife would come in, and the midwife would know about birth in general. The midwife's been to hundreds of births and knows a lot about births in general. And the laboring woman, however, knows about her body, her labor, her birth. And the idea is that there's this sharing, this co-authority that starts to occur that can bring about the best outcomes. And so the quality of blending sort of generalized knowledge of the body with specific knowledge of my body is what she's calling the authoritative knowledge of the body, how she really coined that term in the 90s. And this idea is one that I've borrowed to talk about the therapeutic relationship, for instance, and also in a lot of ways, the parenting relationship and other kinds of relationships where there's this sense of knowing about something in general, bodies in general, and knowing my specific body as it is in a kind of lived experience right now. And that's something that I'd like to really put out there as part of our resistance and part of our recovery, is this idea of partnering with others who have authoritative knowledge of bodies in general, but that doesn't take away our authoritative knowledge, our participation, our co-creation of well-being, whether it's our own physical well-being, to family well-being, to social well-being, community well-being. This idea of partnering to create shared authority is something that I wanted to really highlight in terms of how we can understand our work going forward, whether that's activism or therapeutics or being a dad or whatever. Okay. So, and again, in a situation, when you're in a situation, you might want to look at the situation, a social situation, through that lens. It's like, where does the authoritative knowledge lie here? Who's got it? You know, if there's somebody in the room who's just sort of sucking up all the sense of authority, I know everything, I'm never wrong. Do I sound like somebody that's in the political sphere right now? So there's this quality of really questioning in social environments, where is the authoritative knowledge of the body? Which bodies are really holding the authority, and what do I want to do about that? And am I capturing too much bodily authority in this situation? I remember once had a friend who studied with a yoga teacher that just used to actually hit students with a stick. Bad pose. I mean, it was just amazing why they put up with that, but because this person was supposedly the master. Okay, so a lot of how we can understand that both the normative body, the authoritative body, the occupied body, is to look at disability theory. And there's some brilliant work here. Rae and I both are really working a lot with the work of Eli Clare in this area. And this is where the quote is at the bottom. And so a lot of disability theory asks us to really challenge our assumptions about what is normative, what's a normative body, both in terms of functionality and also size, shape, look, etc. And so I'm just going to read Eli Clare here. Eli says that locating the problems of social injustice in the world rather than in our bodies, it's not my body's not the problem, right? Has been key to naming oppression. It has been powerful for marginalized peoples, including disabled people, to say, leave our bodies alone, stop justifying and explaining your oppressive crap by measuring, comparing, judging, blaming, creating theories about our bodies. But at the same time, we must not forget that our bodies are still part of the equation, that paired with the external forces of oppression are the incredibly internal, body-centered experiences of who we are and how we live with the oppression. To write about the body means paying attention to these experiences. This quote was also echoed by Ta-Nehisi Coates in his book, his first book to his son, talking about how Blackness lands in the body. And I encourage you to read that. It's toward the beginning of the book. So again, now let's start to really take a look at how we reclaim bodily authority and our bodily free press, our free speech, our free body speech. And so, of course, one thing is to resist social toxins of consumerism, body norming, body shaming, for instance, I try to have a cell phone free, a internet free day once a week, usually Sunday. I only probably a couple times a year go onto Facebook, and I don't have any other accounts. And so I really limit my my sort of social media. It's not possible for everybody. Well, I'm sure it is possible, but it's more difficult for some than others, particularly younger folks. But to really watch for particularly environments where consumerism, body norming, body shaming might be occurring, and to see how you feel, internally in the presence of that, to feel into whether or not your body feels like it's being occupied by that toxin, and to call it out when and if you feel ready, in the contexts in which you feel ready to do that. And then I have something I called somatic affirmative action. So being an ally for the different body, to really see allyship more broadly than just, let's say, LGBTQI, BIPOC, all our lovely acronyms, but that the body itself actually needs allyship. And that particularly the body that is in the room right now, whether it's your body or others' bodies, that body, how it's different and how it's assessed as being different or a part of the group or not part of the group, and watching for any way that it might be made wrong is what I would call somatic affirmative action. And then I really want to spend some time talking about bodily inquiry. And so I believe that this work requires us to have some kind of a practice where we inquire on a lived experience level, on the level of simply being with our ongoing lived experience and being with what we can pick up from the outside about others' bodies. And so asking people how they are in their body, what they notice in their body, noticing that in my own body, noticing how I'm sitting, what kind of space am I taking up? How did I just gesture? Did I invade someone's space? Did I notice even that they backed up when I went forward? And so this idea of expanding what I pay attention to in this somatic way is part of, actually, in a sense, the definition of bodily authority. I am capable of authoritative knowledge in general about bodily free press and bodily occupation. When I engage in this open questioning and curiosity and care for my body and the bodies of others, similar to what Walter was talking about when he talked about his meditation experience and how this kind of whoosh came over him. That kind of bodily inquiry is so important as an ongoing practice. And I actually mean that outside of a body discipline that you might be doing. So you might be doing yoga or Tai Chi or contact improvisation or something like that. And those are wonderful means of really working with some of this material. But I think there's also a kind of almost, I call it bodyfulness, but a kind of contemplative practice that we all want to develop in ourselves, that's about this just inherent curiosity and caring on that kind of somatic level. And so participating with your own and others' body narratives. And so this is something that can take some doing, which is to what I call find my body's narratives. And so a lot of times I'll just lie on the floor, and in dance therapy, it's called being moved. You transition from moving to being moved. And this is in the discipline of authentic movement in dance therapy. And so there's this quality of allowing movement to kind of move me, and I'm not willing or controlling or performing a movement. I'm not trying to get anywhere with a movement or accomplish something with the movement, but I'm waiting to be moved by my inner experience. I think that kind of bodily inquiry, whether it's in this dance therapy realm or not, is really critical for a deep dive into bodily authority. And so again, it doesn't have to be a sort of handed down practice. And it is this sense of just profound openness on that sensory motor level that I'm talking about. And what happens when I allow myself to be moved is these kind of suppressed or pushed down narratives begin to emerge. And so all of a sudden my head goes back, and I would have never thought to do that or willed that. And my head starts to go back, and then my head goes back, and then I start to feel sadness. And then I allow myself to just be with that sadness. And then my body kind of curls, and then my arm starts to go up. And what's happening is a bodily narrative. In other words, my body's beginning to tell its own story. It's beginning to speak without the kind of bullying of verbal wording. Dan Siegel once talked about, he said, the left hemisphere of the brain, that logic and linearity and language, tends to bully the right hemisphere, and where a lot of body states and emotional states and images lie. And so this quality of not bullying yourself with words and just allowing the movements to be their own wording. So the body is wording, and the body words sometimes in a kind of a nonsensical way. You have no idea what it means, but you don't need to know that particularly right away. You just stay with it and really be with it the way it is, and allow the body to keep wording until it finds its own sentences, its own coherencies, its own way that it wants to tell the story without, again, the bullying of a wording interpretation of what I have just done. In other words, you're not abstracting your experience into talking about it. You're really living your experience. And then there's just celebrating the physicality of your relationships with others, that you move together, that you really feel the body of your friend, that you include the body of your friend as you sit talking about something. I remember a couple of years ago, I was visiting Rae, and we went up on this cliff, and we sat on a bench overlooking the ocean, and we just talked. We have a tendency to talk for hours. And our bodies were just sort of companionably there on the bench. And I feel like the quality of really being those bodies on the bench really, in a sense, supported and created an architecture for a really powerful conversation. And so the body is really the authority in the room, and my wordful authority grows out of my bodily authority in relationship, oftentimes, to others. So let's just, yeah.
You may already be tracking this, but just noting we have about 10 minutes left, and wondering if you want to make time for some questions at the end. We also have someone who's patiently had their hand up as well. Just wanting to check in with you around timing.
Well, it's a good coincidence because this is my let's take questions slide.
All right.
And then the last one is that one. So we're good.
Perfect. We are in sync.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So Wilhelmina, you've had your hand up patiently. I don't see you on video, but I'm not sure if you still have a question that you wanted to ask. And Layla, I'm not sure if you can find Wilhelmina on the participant list.
For just 1 second. Yep, she's
Sure.
right here.
All right.
Hi, Wilhelmina.
Hello, I'm good. It was an accident. Thank you.
Okay, no worries. I just didn't want to ignore you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, good stuff. All right. Would you like some questions from the list?
Yes, please.
All right. This is it starts with a comment, but it really winds up in a question. Someone says, I've been struggling so deeply with the feeling that I can't practice body movement unless instructed by someone else, even though I've been teaching movement practices for over a decade.
Yeah.
How does one begin to create autonomy when there has been such patterning of moving as prompted by someone else?
Wow. Wow, what a cool question. And I would say that you've already done step one, which is to name it. That's an amazing question. And I would like to say that I can pretty much guarantee that you're not alone. And that in some way we have all been taught how to move, whether it's in, let's say, a yoga class or a dance class or an athletic situation, or how to sit, what kind of posture is right. In other words, we are taught how to signal with our body who we are being told to be, right? And so I think that, again, your first task is already done. You have named it. And once you name it, you can start to study your lived experience, your day-to-day, just really commonplace events, and just say, where is this? Right? Is this where I am moving my body in a way that I've been told how to move, that is the good way to move? Am I just really finding some kind of inner feeling for how I want to move right now? Sometimes those two things are very close, right? Sometimes, let's say, a yoga posture just feels just brilliantly wonderful and just you right then. And then there's other times where it's like somebody's trying to jam me into a shape and a size and a position and a movement that don't feel right. And so you begin to be a kind of a body researcher, and you research your own experience with this, and then begin to talk with others about that and their own experiences of colonization by seemingly wonderful systems, right? Systems that have a lot going for them, that are in many cases really helpful, but can still be used towards colonizing and making the body docile. And so it's not that we have to throw out different body practices, but that we have to really contextualize them for out of our own body authority. And I hope I've begun to answer that. And I would just say also, Rae or Amber, if you want to add in anything in here, I'm happy to hear from either one of you. I'm not the only authority here.
I would say that given the topic, we have an entire room full of people who have bodily authority and can speak to these issues.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Given our time, I thought maybe, Christine, if you'd like, I'd read a couple of comments.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily that you want to speak to, and then maybe we have time for one more question.
Good.
All right.
Sounds good.
So just two comments that I've gathered as I've been watching the chat. One is one that I think many of us can relate to, that it can be so difficult to love a body in pain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Amen to that. Mm-hmm.
And another comment, hearing you speak to the docile body,
Mm-hmm.
I resonate with this experience almost every time I get misgendered. I feel myself shrink and become more vigilant. Thank you for helping me name this experience in me. I feel such compassion for myself in this moment.
Thank you. That just that's very moving. Thank you.
And would you like one more question?
Yeah,
I think we have time.
I think we do.
Yeah, okay. Here's a question about body colonization and domestication of animals. So I'll just read it. This topic sounds very relevant to animal oppression. Do you think that body colonization and domestication is rooted in animal oppression and that we, in brackets, humans, are suffering from the consequences of it?
A hearty yes to that. I think whatever system we can look at, and there are many, that caused us to somehow arbitrarily separate ourselves from our nature as animals, as a type of animal, has caused unbelievable harm across time and across space. And you'll see that is still so firmly entrenched as a form of bodily oppression by just literally how many people still hate Darwin, who their central argument with Darwin is that he called humans a type of animal. And it just has pissed everybody off so badly for over 150 years. And I think this is a really excellent point. And well, gosh, I could go into it. I just got into a big fight with a reviewer of an article that I'm writing because he said animals don't have language, animals don't think. And I just, kind of went postal on him in a, wordful way. And
in a scholarly way.
Yes, in a scholarly way. Yeah, a little bit disguised in scholarly terminology. But
Yeah.
I think that when we start to really feel this quality that being called an animal is something that we can really embrace and admire and participate with, even when different animals have very different capacities than human animals do. I think we're really a long way towards understanding human bodily authority. And of course, the definition of domestication came from biology and came from the sense that, and I think there's 3 definitions of domestication. One is controlling reproduction, which go there, right, about bodily authority, controlling the reproduction of another being, controlling the freedom of movement of another being, of another animal, and I can't remember the third one. It's late. Sorry, but
the first two will give us lots to chew on for a long time.
Yeah, and you can probably Google the third anyway, so there you go. Well, thank you all so much for being here on a Friday night and for all your amazing questions and chats and participations. Thank you so much to Rae and Layla for giving us some lovely productive structure. And I hope that you have wonderful experiences of finding and exercising your bodily authority.
Thank you so much, Christine. Thank you to all of you who posted really excellent questions and comments that we didn't get to, but I did read them, and they were marvelous. It was really heartening to see the ways in which you really took this material and were so thoughtful and curious about it. So thank you for that. This is our last session for the evening. So sleep well, rest well from wherever you are coming from. And we will see you all, hopefully, most of you, many of you, tomorrow. Thank you again to you, Christine. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.